Okay, so in this lesson we're going to talk about evaluating algebraic expressions. So evaluating algebraic expressions. And so that's going to be this part of this section. So we're going to talk about variable expressions. All right, now letters used to represent quantities are called variables. All right, so variables are letters used to represent quantities. And then an algebraic expression is a collection of numbers, variables, operations, symbols, and grouping symbols. All right, so when we talk about variable expressions and evaluating algebraic expressions, we're talking about variables, and variables are letters which are used to represent quantities, and an algebraic expression is a collection of numbers, variables, operation symbols, and remember your operation symbols are things such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and with grouping symbols. Okay, so here's some examples. These are examples of algebraic expressions. So suppose we had something like x plus 3. All right, so that's an algebraic expression. So notice that it's made up of numbers, variables, and operation symbols, arithmetic symbols. So in this case, the addition symbol. We could just have something like negative 1/2 times x. So that's another example of an algebraic expression. So it's made up of a product, some operation is multiplication, and it's made up of a number and a variable. X plus 2 divided by x minus 3. That's an algebraic expression. So it's made up of a division, addition, subtraction, negative 3 times 2x minus 1. That's an algebraic expression. So notice a grouping symbol. In this case would be parentheses. You are multiplying here, negative 3 times what's inside the parentheses, this grouping symbol. And inside the parentheses is the expression 2x minus 1. All right, so those are all examples of algebraic expressions. Now, you don't have to, now notice I'm using the variable x, but I can use any variable. I can say y minus 2. I can even put different variables together, like x divided by y. All right, but all those are examples of algebraic expressions. Okay? All right, now what we're going to do with these algebraic expressions is that we're going to evaluate these algebraic expressions. So that's what we're interested in. We're interested in evaluating these algebraic expressions. So when we evaluate algebraic expressions, basically what we're going to do is we're going to give a specific value to a variable. And so you're going to see what that's going to entail. And to evaluate an algebraic expression means to find its numerical value once we know the value of the variables. All right, so to evaluate an algebraic expression means to find its numerical value. So when you evaluate an algebraic expression, you're going to end up with a number when we substitute into the variable a number. Okay? All right, so let's look at some examples. All right, so we're going to evaluate each expression. So here's the example. So evaluate each expression. And in this case, let's suppose that the value of x is going to be 1 and the value of y is going to be 4. All right, so I want x to be the value 1, and I want y to be the value 4. Okay, so letter A, let's call this 1. All right, letter A. Suppose we had 2y squared. 2y squared. All right, so remember that means 2 times, and whatever y is, I'm multiplying it by itself, so 2y squared. Now remember in this case, y is 4. So wherever you see the variable y, so if you need to just kind of highlight it here. So here's my variable y. So in place of this variable y, I'm going to substitute 4. So I'm going to put 4 in its place. Now, make sure you put that in parentheses because you are squaring this y. You're not squaring this 2 right here. You're squaring this y. Okay, so the only thing being squared is this y. So I get 2 times, in parentheses, y is 4. So instead of leaving it as y, I'm going to put a 4 in its place. And this y, remember, you're squaring it, so which means this 4 is being squared. Okay? All right, now let's talk about the order of operations. So remember in the previous lesson, we talked about the order of operations. So I don't really have a grouping symbol. Also, this is parentheses. But inside this parentheses is just a number. There's nothing else. So there's nothing really I can do within this parentheses. So then the next thing I want to do is take care of the exponents. So take care of the exponents, and I do have that. So if you look at what's being squared, your base here is 4. All right, so don't multiply first, because remember this, when you read it, this means this says 2 times 4 squared. So remember though, multiplication comes after exponents. So you must do exponents first before you do multiplication. Okay, so I'm going to get 2 times, and then 4 squared is 16. Remember, 4 squared means 4 times 4. And then 16 times 2 is 32. All right, so the answer in the blank, you would say 32. All right, so 2y squared, when y is 4, is 32. All right, let's look at B. All right, in B, suppose I had 5y minus x. 5y minus x. All right, so again, wherever I see the variable y, I'm going to substitute 4, and wherever I see the variable x, I'm going to substitute 1. Okay? All right, so I'm going to put 5 in place of y. I'm going to put 1 in place of x. So I'm going to get 5 times, again, right, put this y in parentheses, because sometimes, even though these values are positive, it was negative, you really want to put parentheses here. All right, so just get in the habit of putting parentheses if you need to. So we get 5 times, and in parentheses, y is 4, minus, and x here is 1. All right, now this, even though I put parentheses there, if this was negative, again, it would be very beneficial to put this negative inside the parentheses. But you could have written, and I'm going to write it like this, you could have said 5 times 4 minus 1. All right, so that right here means the same thing as this. But if you had anything negative here, you really need to put that in parentheses. Otherwise, you may make an error at some point. Okay, so using the order of operations, notice what I have. You have multiplication and then subtraction. Multiplication and then subtraction. So according to the order of operations, I do multiplication and division in order from left to right. Now remember, this doesn't mean I do multiplication first. What this means is I do multiplication or division as I see it from left to right. So as I go from left to right, I see multiplication first. And then the last thing I do is subtract and add from left to right. Okay, so multiplication has a higher priority than subtraction. So I do multiplication first. So 4 times 5 is 20, and then 20 minus 1 is 19. So the answer is 19. All right, C. Okay, suppose in this case I had 12x divided by 5y. 12x divided by 5y. So again, wherever we see the variable x, I'm going to substitute 1, and wherever we see the variable y, I'm going to substitute 4. So I'm going to get 12 times x. X is 1. Looks like this, and you could put that in parentheses. If any of these were negative, it's a good idea to put that in parentheses. You don't have to put parentheses here, though, but if any of those were negative, you would benefit by putting in parentheses. Divided by 5 times y, and y is 4. And so, remember, in a previous lesson, you thought of this division as a grouping symbol. So I'm grouping two things. I'm grouping this numerator together, and I'm grouping this denominator. And in this numerator, I am multiplying, and that's only one operation, so I can do it right now. 12 times 1 is 12, no big deal. And over here, 5 times 4, I can do the denominator now. 5 times 4 is 20. All right, now, remember in a previous course, though, you learned that you need to reduce as much as possible. So 12/20ths, they're both divisible by 2, and again, you may want to use the largest common factor, which in this case would be 4. But if you see that they're even, you know they're both divisible by 2, so 12 divided by 2 is 6, 20 divided by 2 is 10, and again I can go further. They're still even. They're divisible by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and I can't do anything else. But again, it would have been easier to use the greatest common factor. And so the greatest common factor of 20 and 12 is 4. And so when you do this, you're going to say 12 divided by 20, and then divide both of these by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 20 divided by 4 is 5, which is what we got here. All right, but again, it doesn't matter whether you use the greatest common factor or not. Just make sure that at the end, your final answer is simplified. So you make sure your answer is simplified. Answer needs to be reduced, simplified. Okay, reduced, simplified. Okay. Letter D. So let's look at D. All right, so in D, we have x divided by y plus 6 divided by y. So let's say we have that. X divided by y plus 6 divided by y. And again, wherever we see the variable x, I'm going to substitute 1. And wherever we see the variable y, I'm going to substitute 4. So let's see what we get. Okay, so x, remember, is 1. So x divided by y is 4. So I get 1 divided by 4. Remember, x is 1, y is 4. So that's what I get. Plus 6 divided by y, and y is 4. All right. Now remember, in a previous course, in this case, you're adding two fractions, and notice the denominators are the same. So I can add these two fractions right now. I don't have to find a least common denominator because the denominators are the same. So 1/4 plus 6/4 is, so how many fourths do I have altogether? I have altogether 7/4. 1 plus 6 is 7. So 7/4. Now again, don't make the mistake and add the denominators. Don't say this is 7/8. Because remember, when you add or subtract, you're talking about partitions. So I'm eating a fourth of a candy bar, and then over here I'm eating, obviously this is more than one candy bar, but 6/4 of 2 candy bars, and so altogether I'm eating 7/4, almost 2 candy bars. Okay, so just be careful when you add or subtract fractions. Think of these as partitions. So you're partitioning a group of something into a group of 4. You're taking one of them. You're partitioning 2 things in a group of 4. You're taking 6 parts of these, and when you add them, you get 7 parts of 4. Okay. All right. So letter E. Let's look at E now. So letter E. Suppose we had this. Suppose we had y squared minus x squared. Y squared minus x squared. Now be careful with this one because you are squaring and then you're also subtracting. And again, if any of these were negative, it would be a very good idea. In this case, you really need to put these in parentheses. All right, but it's not. But I'm still going to put parentheses here because I am raising it to a power. You don't have to. So in other words, you could say, all right, if y is 4, remember y is 4, and x is 1. So if y is 4, I'm going to get 4 squared minus, and then x, remember, is 1 squared. So that's what I get. So remember the order of operations. I'm squaring and subtracting. So I got to do exponents first. 4 squared is 16 minus 1 squared is 1. Remember, 1 squared means 1 times 1. And then 16 minus 1 is 15. Okay. Now, some of you may have put parentheses there. It doesn't matter. Okay, watch. You get 4 squared minus 1 squared, like this. And so 4 squared is 16, minus, and then 1 squared is 1, and that's where these two are the same. They look, contextually, they look the same. Okay? All right, so that is evaluating algebraic expressions. That's all that's dealing with. So it's not that difficult. It's fairly easy. So when you evaluate algebraic expressions, you're actually going to substitute into the variables the values that the variable is equal to. Now remember, in this example, that's what my values are. In other examples, the values will be different. Okay, and in another lesson later on, these values will be negative. So right now, you're only dealing with positive values here. In a later lesson, they will be negative. Okay, so that's going to take care of this lesson.